The Patients Association calls on Theresa May to intervene to stop the junior doctors' strikes. As the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges say the action's disproportionate and disappointing, the voice of the patient urges Theresa May to act.
The immediate problem is for her to step in and stop this, pause it until she's had an opportunity to really look at the facts.
Also this lunchtime, nothing has changed. The family of the little boy washed up dead on a beach bemoans the enduring plight of the refugees. Hurricane Hermine hits Florida, does its worst and blows on as a tropical storm. And how our best friend in the animal world may be carrying a nasty, dangerous little intruder.
This is ITV News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. It is a row between the government and junior doctors, but it's patients who are in the firing line of the 5-day strikes. The organisation that speaks for them today told ITV News the Prime Minister should pause implementation of the new contract for junior doctors in England and get talks going again. That as medicine's elite made their opposition to the series of all-out strikes clear. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges said it was disproportionate and disappointing. The General Medical Council warned of real problems for patients, the service and the profession. The junior doctors insist the strikes will go ahead. Here's our political correspondent, Libby Vina.
Save our NHS! Save our NHS!
An unprecedented crisis in the NHS, with doctors threatening multiple all-out strikes. Today, the pressure is growing for the government to rethink imposing the contract. The Health Secretary wouldn't be drawn on the industrial action when he left home.
Five separate strikes. What are you going to do about that?
But what about his boss? The Patients Association says Mrs May should pause the whole process.
We would like her to do what she did with Hinkley Point, for example, and take time to think about it, look at it in real detail and find out from patients and perhaps other members of staff in the health service what needs to be done to have a really good look. But the immediate problem is for her to step in and stop this, pause it.
Save our NHS!
The threat of further strikes has also alarmed senior doctors, prompting a statement from the medical colleges. The Academy of Medical Royal Colleges is disappointed at the prospect of further sustained industrial action by junior doctors, it says. We are acutely aware that the NHS is under extreme pressure at the moment. Patient safety and quality of care must be the priority. We do not consider the proposed strikes are proportionate. Meanwhile, hospital bosses say patient services will be disrupted on a scale not seen before.
They're very concerning. They're probably going to end up, if they go ahead, resulting in 500,000 lost operations and 4 million lost outpatient appointments. That's a huge concern.
But junior doctors argue government intransigence has left them with no option. They're now also urging the Prime Minister to step in.
And I think it's a real shame that the Prime Minister hasn't stepped in sooner. I think Theresa May needs to ask herself a very serious question as to what she is hoping to achieve from this dispute.
But Mrs May seems unlikely to listen, having yesterday blamed the BMA for playing politics.
Well, Libby is joining us now live from Westminster. We heard you there at the end of your report. You think it unlikely that the Prime Minister will get involved?
Well, at the moment, it's looking that way. Government sources I've been speaking to this morning have said that ministers really can't be seen to be held to ransom by the BMA, as it were. They pointed out that the government had made more than 100 concessions over the contract in negotiations that have gone on for 4 years. But having said all of that, the politics of this don't look good. The BMA recommended that their members should accept the contract and they rejected it. There's clearly a lot of anger out there among the profession about the way this has been handled. And you may remember when Mrs May appointed her cabinet, it seemed that Jeremy Hunt thought perhaps he would be reshuffled. He arrived at number 10 without his NHS lapel badge. He left smiling with it on. I think she may now be thinking perhaps a fresh pair of eyes and fresh pair of hands at the department would have been a good idea.
Libby, thank you. And if you'd like to know more about the strike action and whether or not treatment will be affected, go to our website, itv.com/news. The family of the little Syrian boy whose body was washed up on a beach a year ago today said nothing has changed and not enough is being done to help refugees. 3-year-old Aylan Kurdi became a symbol of the migrant crisis when he died as his family tried to flee their war-torn country. Here, campaigners laid flowers in his memory and petitioned the government to do more to help other refugee children. Well, Sejal Carrier's report contains images that you may find upsetting from the start.
A year ago, Aylan Kurdi's tiny body, washed up on a Turkish beach, became a defining image of human tragedy. One little boy representing thousands more who've died crossing the sea to Europe, highlighting a humanitarian crisis on its doorstep. Aylan, here on the left, died alongside his brother Galib and his mother when the boat they were travelling in capsized after they'd fled Syria. Today, his aunt Tima said global outrage at her nephew's death has proved short-lived.
Why we are closing our eyes on them? Why we cannot help them? This has been continuing for the last 6 years. We can't watch people are dying every single day. Children, they are innocent kids. All what they want is toys and food. It's like my own kids, your own kids.
On the anniversary of his death, campaigners gathered for a memorial outside the Home Office and urged the Home Secretary to take immediate action to help refugee children, particularly those in the jungle camp in Calais, 387 of whom campaigners say are eligible to come to the UK.
Without government support, we're very, very limited in what we can do. Amber Rudd has a lot of power. Let her enjoy the use of that power to bring these children to safety.
The Home Office says it is working closely with the French authorities over this issue. The former Prime Minister David Cameron has already pledged the UK would settle 20,000 Syrian refugees by 2020. France has committed to taking 30,000 in the next 2 years. But Germany has accepted the highest number, with nearly 300,000 refugees expected in the country this year.
5,000 more people have died at sea, just like Aylan Kurdi. Political leaders have not responded to public pressure. We have to accept more refugees and we have to give more support to people in neighbouring countries. The world's got to act fast.
Aylan Kurdi's family had hoped global outrage over his death would shift the debate around the refugee crisis. But they say so far nothing has changed. Sejal Carrier, ITV News.
A man's appeared in court this morning charged over the deaths of a boy and a woman who were hit by a car being chased by police. 10-year-old Micaiah McDermott and his aunt Roseanne Cooper were killed in the collision in southeast London on Wednesday. 3 girls were also injured. 23-year-old Joshua Dobby is charged with 7 offences, including causing death by dangerous driving. Man's been charged with murdering a banker on a night out in southeast London. Oliver Dearlove died in hospital after he was punched in Blackheath. 31-year-old Trevor Timon appeared in court by video link this morning. And the electronics company Samsung is recalling its flagship smartphone after battery problems caused dozens of the devices to catch fire during or after charging. The company said customers who'd bought the Galaxy Note 7 would be able to swap them for new devices. Now, the company which jointly operates Southern Rail has announced profits of close to £100 million, despite widespread disruption for commuters using the network. Hundreds of rail services have already been cut from Southern's timetable this year, causing ongoing misery for passengers. Well, our consumer editor Chris Choi joins me live here in the studio. Go ahead posting big profits, not playing well out there.
Not really. I mean, passengers have been looking for good news. This is more good news for the investors. And do I need to remind you of the kind of scenes that have been plastered over our screens of disruption, delays, strikes, cancellations? It's been going on for months. Today, as you said, the parent company that co-owns Southern Rail's operator has made almost £100 million in pre-tax profits. Let me take you through the graphic here with that detail. That firm that co-owns Southern Rail is 65% owned by Go Ahead Group. Its pre-tax profits were £99.8 million. That's actually a 27% rise. And think about the context, it comes just a day after £20 million of taxpayers' money was earmarked to help Southern Rail's problems. So the idea of a lot of money moving in their direction. You can imagine the reaction of passengers today. They find this news about as comfortable as some of the journeys they've endured recently. Here's what some of them told us.
Well, I think it's disgusting that over the last 3 months, we had nothing but strikes, delays.
They should be running the service properly. They're paid to do it properly and they're not doing it properly. So it's a disgrace.
Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, considering they're ripping everyone off with the fact that they don't run their trains on time or strikes, I think it's totally unfair.
What's the company saying?
Well, they say this profit figure has been misunderstood and misinterpreted. Now, they wouldn't actually do an interview with me on camera, but they have told me the following. They say Southern made zero profit last year. They say all our income went into delivering the service. The profits figure being reported relates to other businesses owned by our parent company.
Chris, thank you. Still to come this lunchtime, a warning to dog owners. Your pet pooch could be putting you at risk. But first, a Royal Navy destroyer, HMS Daring, is setting off to the Persian Gulf this lunchtime to join the fight against so-called Islamic State. The warship, which takes over from HMS Defender, will help protect US aircraft carriers during their strikes against militant cells in Iraq and Syria. Well, our correspondent Dan Rivers is live in Portsmouth for us right now. There he is. When is she due to go?
She just sailed right past Alistair. You can probably just see her over my shoulder there, just heading out now on this 9-month deployment. Very emotional scenes down here in Portsmouth, as there always are after those last-minute preparations this morning. All those final supplies loaded on, and off she goes to take part in the fight against the so-called Islamic State. So HMS Daring, a Type 45 destroyer with 260 crew aboard, 8,000 tons of military hardware heading out to the Gulf, equipped with the latest air warfare technology, including this Sea Viper missile with a range of 70 miles, which can provide a shield against targets like fighter planes, drones and anti-ship missiles. Her launch a few years ago wasn't without controversy. They had a lot of problems with the engines, particularly the gas turbines aboard, but the commanding officer assures me that those problems and hitches have now been sorted out.
They're being resolved as we speak. So for the last 2 years we've had a project underway to improve the availability and reliability of the propulsion plant. A large sum of money was made available in the last defence review, which will fund that work for the next 8 to 10 years or so. And it's an ongoing process as we learn more about the way the plant that behaves in the challenging conditions of the Arabian Gulf.
Nervous but excited at the same time, because I joined straight after my training. So now we're ready to go now. So it's a bit like nervous to see what it brings, but excited also to see what happens, what we can do.
Of course, a very emotional day for the families and the crew who will be waving off their loved ones for 9 months now.
Crying last night because I don't want him to go. Then she ended up crying herself to sleep last night because she didn't want him to go. We all don't want him to go, but he has to.
It's the scene that has been played out so many times down the centuries here in Portsmouth. Some of the crew at least might get some shore leave to be able to come home for Christmas. So some good news amid all this sadness as they're waved off for that 9-month deployment. Alistair.
Dan, thank you, and your guests, thanks. Florida. I'm so sorry, I do beg your pardon. Florida has been battered by strong winds and heavy rain after a hurricane hit the state's northern coast earlier. Tens of thousands of homes were without power after Hurricane Hermine made landfall. It is now being classed a tropical storm, but it was the first hurricane to hit Florida in more than a decade, as Olivia Kinsley reports.
FYI for anybody in Treasure Island, really deep water here.
If Florida's forgotten what a hurricane's like, this is a brutal reminder. Hermine hit the coast early today with 80-mile-per-hour winds and waves that pulled roads into the sea.
That storm surge by itself is life-threatening. We're going to have significant power lines down. We're going to have a lot of downed trees across the state.
A NASA satellite photographed the storm as it gathered strength. A state of emergency was declared in 51 states to help them prepare.
And we just buckle down and we pray.
In some low-lying counties, people were ordered to evacuate. The authorities warning that if they didn't, they couldn't guarantee their safety. Daylight revealed extensive damage to roads and houses. Tens of thousands of homes are without power.
The street is completely underwater.
The last hurricane to strike land in Florida was in 2005. This one is now a waiting game for the winds to die down and the water to recede.
I got shutters on the front, the south and east sides, and I've been down here just checking all my lines and making sure my boat's secure.
In 11 years, never has the Sunshine State seen such a storm. Olivia Kinsley, ITV News.
Still in the States, and Donald Trump's wife, Melania, is suing the Daily Mail online for more than £100 million over claims that she had worked as an escort in the 1990s. The article was retracted on its website by the Daily Mail, and the company said, and I quote, "It regrets any misinterpretation." Mrs. Trump's lawyers say the claims were 100% false and damaging. Now, almost a third of dogs in the UK are carrying ticks. That, according to a major new study. Researchers from Bristol University, who studied thousands of dogs, also found that their owners were being put at risk. The ticks can carry parasites and diseases, including Lyme disease, which can cause serious health problems in humans.
This is good, solid, hard data which has revealed some very shocking and surprising things about the distribution, the population and the potential that ticks have to give diseases to our pets and ourselves. So the advice is very clear. Go to your vets, ask them, and they'll tell you how best to treat your pets when it comes to dealing with ticks.
And our website has details of how to spot and indeed remove ticks from your dogs. The address for that, of course, itv.com/news. Now, after Great Britain's success at the Rio Olympics, hopes are high for the Paralympians when the competition gets underway next week. All this week, as we've counted down, we've spent time with some of the incredible athletes who have overcome trauma to compete. Gordon Reid is someone who's represented Great Britain in wheelchair tennis at the last two Paralympics and will again in Rio. Gordon lost the use of his legs when he was 12 after a neurological condition. He says sport saved him from depression, and he's since competed in Beijing and London 2012 and is now ranked as the British #1 and the world #2.
Sport helped me a lot in my rehab and recovery. You know, it got me back active, got me back healthy, and it also helped me socially because I could meet other people in chairs and see how amazing a life they were living and see how great characters they were, and kind of reminded me that life's not over because you've got a disability. I mean, you can start an amazing new life because of it.
Extraordinary fellow. Martin Colclough's been working for years rehabilitating the injured by introducing them to sport. He was a client. You work with him.
Someone I'm very aware of through his success in sport.
I mean, what I found fascinating, and as I said, we've been talking about this with amazing people throughout the week. Tammy was here. Tanny was here yesterday. It's not only physical, it's mental as well.
Absolutely. I think Gordon makes a very great point about the psychological benefits of sport. It helps sort of re-establish some goals in your life, and a Paralympic goal is just an excellent example of that. So the mental health benefits are superb.
Sure. And that segues neatly, we can see from the shirt you're wearing, that you now focus your work on Help for Heroes, which means men and women who have suffered frightful injuries in the service of their country, but still want to do the athletic, competitive Paralympian thing. Does that bring different challenges, or are they just the same as people like Gordon?
I think there are more similarities and differences between the military and civilian populations. They all want to move forward in their lives, and together with organisations like the British Paralympic Association, we can help rebuild lives
But
through sport.
accepting for them in the first place, having been trained soldiers, men and women, that can be a real problem.
It can be at the early stages, but we find that many of them want to really get back into the game very early on and be part of a team again.
Yeah. What about people like Joe Townsend? I mean, that's an example. You know of the story, you've worked with him.
Worked with Joe since 2009, and he's a great example of someone who's started at a low level in sport and gone on to achieve Paralympic success.
And the next generation, we sit here chatting about it. Neither of us wish this to befall anybody, but it will happen, whether it's out in a war zone or whether it's just somebody who was born absolutely fine and then has something dreadful happen to them. What's your focus on the next generation?
Well, we're always monitoring what's going on and adapting to changing needs, and I think that mental health example is a good one because sport is such a good carrier for those positive messages about how you can overcome these illnesses and injuries through adopting sport as part of a healthy lifestyle. And
final point, children who are still at school but have those challenges, you work with them too?
Not necessarily, but we sometimes... I think some of our athletes work with the children and they provide excellent role models in that respect.
We wish you well, and we wish everyone great success next week.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed. Good to see you. And a reminder of our main stories this lunchtime. The Patients Association has told ITV News that Theresa May, the Prime Minister, should intervene to stop the junior doctors' strikes. It comes as the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges said that the strike action was disappointing and disproportionate. And the family of the little Syrian boy whose body was washed up on a beach a year ago said today nothing has changed for the refugees over the last 12 months. Here, campaigners laid flowers to Aylan Kurdi's memory and petitioned the government to do more to help other refugee children. And that is it this lunchtime. I'll be back with the ITV Evening News at 6:30 with Ranveer Singh. I hope you can join us both. The news where you are follows the weather. But for now, from all of us here, bye-bye.